let me just say this unequivocally. Derek Jeter was one of the greatest shortstops of modern times, period. Let's do this. Honus Wagner stopped playing baseball in 1917. That was a long time ago. You know who has been the greatest offensive shortstop in the post-Honus Wagner portion of baseball history? Doug, you want to take a guess at this?
Let's see.
You can do it.
Number 2? Is it number 2?
Number 2, Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter is the answer. Here's why. Offensive wins above replacement. Every shortstop of the live ball era, he ranks number 1, and it's not close. Twice as many 200-hit seasons as any other shortstop in all that time. 8. Twice as many seasons hitting 300 than any other shortstop in the last 50 years. He's got 12 of those. Highest OPS plus of any shortstop in the live ball era who started at least 2,500 games at short. Yeah, bigger OPS plus than Cal Ripken Jr. So, Doug, can you please reiterate for us that Derek Jeter was not overrated?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that just sort of was accentuated by just either being on the field against him. And ultimately, my last season, I went to Yankee spring training, and that sort of confirmed it even more. And he aged like, you're supposed to, right? He aged and slowed down at certain points. But by then, he had established something that was so hard to comprehend as someone trying to get him out. And you think about the meetings, right? You play against players and you go into meetings and say, how do we get this guy out? Like, how do we pitch this guy? How do we know? And Jeter was an enigma. And the thing about him is, like, the way I think of it is I was trained under Jimmy Pearsall. And Jimmy Pearsall, as an outfield coach, would say, hey, look, you are always in motion as a center fielder. You see everything in front of you. You see the pitcher, the catcher, you know where they're setting up. You know the pitcher's capability, you know the count, and you know the hitter's tendencies. And based on all that information, when the ball is about to hit, enter the hitting zone, you should be in motion. You should be already cheating because you should be able to deduce that, okay, this is more likely to be a ball hitting right center. So a lot of times I was already a step or two headed where I was going before the contact was made, and you get really good at it. And so Jeter was one of those rare few guys that you couldn't really cheat on. You couldn't really get that extra jump on because he could disguise his swing with the best of them. I mean, part of it was, think about a fastball inside. If the fastball's coming in, you have to get the head of the barrel out quickly to pull it. If you're too late, you get jammed. But when you have a Jeter approach with this inside-out swing, you can then let it get deep, even get beat unintentionally, and then throw your hands inside out and get the barrel. So what that does is it takes the same pitch where you're anticipating as a center fielder that he's going to pull because it's inside and the hitter is a pull hitter like Sheffield or something. Then Jeter is able to carve that to right field. And now he slices it the other direction. So now I can't really lean one way or the other. I have to wait for him to make his contact. And that split second is the difference between a running catch and a double. And so he was truly a master of disguise. You think of someone like Andre Agassi, players that had great returns of service, their ability to return serves, and they could disguise their swing, and all of a sudden they hit a cross court. You don't know where they're going, and the later they can disguise it, the more effective and flat-footed your opponent is. That was Derek Jeter, his ability to carve it all over the place. So not only did he have the numbers, he just had something unique to him, his ability to really be this sort of master of disguise. And he wasn't hitting 50 home runs, but he was doing so much damage because of that impact. So I just watched a guy that had so much confidence, rightfully so, in his ability to read pitchers, hit different kinds of pitchers. I tried to give him a scouting report one spring training of Randy Wolf when we were playing the Phillies, and he just said, I want to hear it. I want to hear it. He said, is he a lefty? I said, yeah. I said, that's all I need to know. He's a lefty. I got it, So I was like, okay, I guess we won't give him any tips.
Wow. Yeah, the innate feel for everything it took to be a great baseball player, that was him. You as you mentioned, you were his teammate very briefly. How would you describe Derek Jeter as a teammate? I mean, you saw him walk in the room, the way other players interacted with him. Was there something different about that than maybe we would imagine?
There was. I mean, I think I was very impressed. I mean, I knew him early on because when I used to work out in Tampa, Florida with my brother. And so when he was coming up, I would see him and, so I knew him early. I played against him in the Arizona Fall League. And I remember thinking, wow, he didn't have a lot of pop, but he had that inside out swing. He was always hitting, so I played him, right center field. That was his style. But what came with that was this true ambassadorship. He was, when I saw him later in life, 2005, I was impressed how he signed every autograph. He was out there talking to people. I remember a guy came and I was stretching. He said, "Tell Jeter his high school baseball coach." It was somebody from way back. And, I went out there and told him and, he's like, "Who is it?" So I kind of explained it and then he was like from Kalamazoo or whatever. He just, he was very gracious with the fans. He understood his role. He understood the impact it had to celebrate the game. And he, this is Jeter, so there's no limit to how many autographs you could sign. It would never end. And he found ways to just do it, just be out there early and really had that sort of calm about him. And his approach, it reflected that on the field. He was very calm, really true ice water. It wasn't just like stoic. I mean, he really was in control. And you could tell that he had a sense of, I'm a step ahead of you. And, sort of like facing Greg Maddux. He just had that approach and confidence to go with it. And you're not talking about a guy who hit the ball 450 feet to the opposite field or was, a blazer. He was good speed, but, he wasn't like, oh, these are the tools. He had these intangibles. And the intangibles kind of translated to things that were important about, spreading the joy of the game, right? Being someone that you want to look to represent the game. And therefore he transcended baseball, right? He was a superstar on every level, whether it's the commercials or just the idea of being iconic. And I always found it, especially playing with him for that brief spring training in 2005, and I always found it kind of insulting when I heard them talk about Jeter like he wasn't as good as he was, or he was. I understood he wasn't necessarily like, Ozzie Smith at shortstop, but there was things that you couldn't explain about his instincts for the game that sort of also separated him. And I watched a player that was completely dominant, and knowing that, okay, if you got obsessed with home runs, that's one way to look at it. But this guy was authentic, and there was something to him that was a separator. And I was told this story about how he, before my son was born, we kind of already knew what his name was going to be. And I was painting the nursery, I was making this room and I was excited, and I was on the roof and whatever. And I thought about the bat rack of whose bat do I want to put and hang in this room. And I had trouble because I was really annoyed at the PEDs and steroids and how it clouded my career. I really couldn't think of a whole lot of players that were great, but also kind of out of that cloud. And then I said, no, it's got to be Derek Jeter. It's got to be Jeter. So I want Jeter's bat signed, personalized to my son, and I want that up there. So I texted him, and I'd been out of the game for 3 years, and I still had his number, and but he would respond. So I texted him. I said, "Hey man, don't want to bother you. I know you're in spring training. Can you mind sending a bat? I kind of thought about it. I really like your bat personalized to my son, and if you could do that, that would be great." Not only did he send the bat personalized, it was overnighted. It literally arrived the next morning at my doorstep in a box, and I put it up, and it was like, it's to my son, Derek Jeter signed, and just put it up on the wall. I mean, that's how he was, and when he announced the retirement, I was calling the Baltimore game, the series, right, the sort of their last home series, and I came out and talked to him. I gave, this is how much appreciation I had from as an ambassador, as a player, as a person. I actually wrote a handwritten card, thank you note for his career. And I gave him, a bunch of stuff just to thank him for. So that tells you a lot. That's not something I even thought of for anybody that I played against, let alone with. So I think he's underrated on a lot of levels, and that's why he's more than a Hall of Famer in my book.
Yeah, he's reached that place where not too many people get there, but you get where you get so overrated, you're underrated.
Right.
That's the thing about Derek Jeter. He was underrated, and not just in the numbers he put up or even his role in all those championships. It was that thing that you just described. It was understanding who he was, what it meant to be him. There's so many star baseball players, star athletes who don't understand the responsibility that goes with that level of stardom. He always got it. He got every aspect of it. I know that there were people in my business who didn't enjoy the Derek Jeter interview sessions because Derek, post-game, he would answer questions, but like you weren't going to learn anything earth-shaking. But I really enjoyed talking to him because, you know what, Doug? Like he was the man. He was the face of baseball. And any day that you went to a Yankee game or a Yankee spring training game, you could walk in the room and know at some point Derek Jeter was going to come to his locker and you could speak to him every day. Like that doesn't happen with very many stars of his stature. And so that kind of leads into my story. I mean, when you were talking about intangibles, this is my favorite Derek Jeter story. This was about maybe 10 years ago. I was writing a story about winners, which I know is a term we throw around a lot. But my thought was I'm going to try to define what separates true winners from everyone else. I know it seems surprising, but I thought, hey, I should talk to Derek Jeter about this. Call me crazy. That's just what I thought. So the premise of the piece was that what separates people like him from everyone else is that ability to play with a special energy and focus every game, every week, every month, every year. That feeling that every at-bat matters. Every play in the field matters. Every moment on a baseball field, every single day matters. That's how Derek Jeter played. Now, he wasn't the only player I talked to in this piece. Like Chase Utley was in it. I remember Johnny Damon was in it. I talked to Jim Leland because of the way he used to find a way to motivate players. There are a lot of people in it, but he was kind of the poster boy. So, like, again, call me crazy. That's how I saw him. All right, so I go to see the Yankees. And, walk in and Andy Pettit's there. So I'm talking to Andy Pettit about Jeter. Andy just had this way about him. And he says to me, I got a question you should ask him. Why don't you ask him if he's ever mailed in an at-bat? So I laughed and I said, yeah, right. He said, no, really, ask him that. Okay, so Derek arrives at his locker for our conversation. Explain the premise of the story. We talk about that. And I mean, again, like I know some people thought Derek was the king of the non-answer answer, but not for a story like this. He loved the topic. He was great. He was awesome to talk to about it. And then he just kind of segued to the point where I thought, all right, here we go. Time to ask Andy Pettit's question. So I said, Derek, have you ever mailed in an at-bat? Ever? And he looked at me and he said, what? I said, do you think you've ever mailed in an at-bat at any point in your career? And he got this look on his face and he said, like, snapped at me. He said, no, I would never do that. He said, I mean, I've gotten back to the dugout after an at-bat and said, what was I doing? What was I thinking? Why'd I swing at that pitch? Something like that. But have I mailed in an at-bat? I would never do that. Never. And like, of course he wouldn't, but just that look on his face when I asked him that question was so classic. I'll never forget it.